Moving into Gen 4, Dragonite was ready to cook thanks to the physical special split, and the new move Outrage. With this new power, Dragonite couldn't be walled much besides Skarmory, Bronzong, and Heatran, so we made a hyper offense team to really abuse this raw power. Our lead of choice was Colberberry Azelf. This is specifically to beat Machamp leads, and it helps beat stall teams that tend to bring in Scarf Tyranitar on turn 1. Its job was to set rocks up and do damage with its boom. It did what it needed and it did it well. For our Dragonite, we threw a choice ban on it to annihilate defensive cores. Outrage and Earthquake destroys everything in the game except for Skarmory and Bronzong. We had Magnezone to remove those guys. We each had to get it in as often as possible to utilize its wall-breaking power. Against offense, it still had utility using Extreme Speed to check Flygon and Latios, leaving Dragonite have utility regardless of matchup. To aid Dragonite in its offensive efforts, we drafted Choice Specs Magnezone. It removes Bronzong and Skarmory with Thunderbolt, while Hidden Power Grass and Flash Cannon were to nail stuff like Gistcore, Hippowdon, and Swampert mid-game, when we didn't need to trap stuff anymore. It served as an emergency check to Latios when we needed it, and it always put in insane work. For more mid-game pressure, we brought the boys, Bronzong and Machamp. Bronzong was rocking its common mid-game Trick Room set, where it could normally remove something unless defensive Rotom came in, and with Trick Room up, it let Machamp go crazy. Even its resisted explosion would remove stuff like Heatran, which was brutal. Following Bronzong was Machamp, with its great coverage of Dynamic Punch, Payback, and Ice Punch. It let us hit most things super effectively, except for the steals that Magnezone would be tasked with removing earlier in the game, as well as defensive Rotom. Substitute was to help drop into Constabulary range, where often we could get 2 or 3 kills with Machamp if we played our cards right. He was absurdly dangerous with Trick Room support. Finally, for a sweeper we had Rain Trance Kingra, who outsped even Choice Scarfers with Rain Up. Lumberry helped us switch into easier and set up, while also removing confusion from Outrage, which was sometimes needed. It also made for a good Heatran counter, which was really useful sometimes. We ended this generation with a perfect record, which was great to see. Gens 4 to 6 are kind of our strong suits, so we were happy to do so well. The offensive synergy between everything, and the ability to break stall while not being completely helpless against hyper offense, made this team great, and Dragonite consistently would get at least 1 kill. Against slow, bulky teams, it would often take 2 or 3. It's set up well for the next generation. Even after this challenge, we beat multiple top 40 players with it with relative ease. It's solid.
Moving into Gen 5, we knew we had to use the infamous Dragmag structure. It's pretty widely accepted as a competent playstyle, and Dragonite is often featured on it, so we figured we'd roll with it into Gen 5. We had a pretty different take on a lead for this generation, however, as we had a dedicated lead for every game, and that was Infernape. Equipped with a Focus Sash, Infernape could consistently get Stealth Rocks up, and if it were faster, it could even get an Endeavor off on something as it dies to let Salamence get a Moxie boost easier. Tom was for slower leads like Skarmory, looking to set up hazards as a suicide lead. Dragonite once again rocks its Choice Band set to just rip apart Stall and offense teams alike. Extreme Speed, Outrage, and Earthquake is all Dragonite really needs for offense, though we included Thunder Punch to hit stuff like Niche Slowbro for effective damage. It was also consistently excellent and helped break down the opponent's threats. For our next dragon, we brought Dragonite Salamence, as it was good at coming in on fat, bulky Pokemon and becoming immediately threatening. It was also great at forcing damage on Pokemon earlier in the game, as the opponent couldn't just sacrifice an Endeavor Pokemon anymore, and Salamence would get its Moxie boost and quickly get out of hand. For our last dragon, we had Choice Scarf Latios to help in speed control, as well as facing off against threats like Keldeo. Its speed let us check annoying threats like Dragon Dancers and Choice Scarfers, like Keldeo or Garchomp. We brought on Trick instead of an additional cover move, like Thunderbolt to ruin setup Pokemon like Reuniclus or Volcarona, which we would sometimes give free setup to. You can't have Dragmag without the Mag, so Magnezone is our next pick for the team. We decided to get a little goofy with it too, and so with no faith in the player base, we chose Analytic as the ability over Magnapole, assuming no one would bother to check. We were right, and those analytic hits were absolutely disgusting. It always did its job at removing Steel types, and always put in overtime destroying those thick Pokemon. It was a complete superstar. For the last slot on our team, we had Alakazam wielding the Focus Sash set. With Magic Guard, we could almost always survive one hit, and it let us get off an emergency Thunder Wave or retaliate with a strong Psychic. It was great in last Pokemon Showdowns, and it always did what it needed to. Consistently check out of control threats. We ended this generation with a record of 9-1, not too shabby at all, and the one loss we had was just extremely unfortunate. Dragonite did great, consistently did his job, and would often force the opponent into a position where they were losing a Pokemon no matter what they chose. In tandem with our other offensive Pokemon and support from Magnezone, our opponent would buckle under pressure, and it bode well for next generation.
For Gen 6, we decided to build a bulky offensive team. Our team split evenly between threats and tanks. Dragonite was our first threat, and we decided to get wild with Weakness Policy and Dragon Dance, since Multiscale can help when baiting a super effective hit. Our attacks were Dragon Claw, E-Speed, and Iron Head for fairies. This was somewhat inconsistent as expected, but very fun to play. Next up on offense, we had Mega Metagross. It was a standard rock setter with Zen Headbutt, Meteor Mash, and Earthquake. And then our last big threat was Specs Keldeo, with Scald, Secret Sword, Hydro Pump, and HP Ice. Moving on to the second half of our team, we had our 3 tanks, with the Moongus leading it off with an eject button and spreading status moves. Then we had Slowbro to create a pair of regenerators, with Scald, Slack Off, Ice Beam, Thunder Wave, and Colbur Berry for its own protection. Lastly, we had Zapdos to defog and packing Heat Wave to help against Magnezone and Ferrothorn. Our record ended up as 6-4. We had a strong 4-0 start, then feel like we got unlucky a few games, losing close matches, and getting unlucky misses and some tough crits. Weakness policy was inconsistent as expected, and sometimes Metagross and Keldeo didn't quite have enough punch to pick up the slack. Additionally, Zapdos performed well, but a Magic Bounce Pokemon, or perhaps a different defogger such as Latios, would have brought us more success. Overall, the team wasn't a big failure, but we aimed for better.